So, what's the narcissist, or if we're really going to be accurate here, the highly narcissistic person up to? So, why am I making that distinction? Well, with my last video, I did point out that we're not always dealing with a narcissistic sociopath. That's a very specific problem. If you're here, it's extremely likely you've got a parent or a couple of parents, or you've been very unfortunate and had a partner that you've been with for a considerable amount of time who was a narcissistic sociopath, right? Or something very much ticking, 8 to 9 out of the boxes of what would qualify. But not everybody else that you have problems with as a result of that experience is a sociopathic narcissist, because statistically, apart from anything else, it's just not likely. And I said a lot more about this in the last video, right? But what you are going to have is a whole nother world of problems to deal with. Now you're a survivor when it comes to dealing with other people, because your and my scars, you're now wide open to every narcissistic piece of trash that gets the scent of your damage and hones in on you. So there are people, no doubt about it, who are not narcissistic sociopaths, who are making your life more difficult than it has to be. And those are, in my experience, this is my opinion, because I've had a lot of this, especially when I was looking after my mum, because I got put in a lot of very difficult positions by doing that. I had to deal with a lot of different people, a lot of different professionals, some of them extraordinary, and some of them extraordinarily sinister in their attitude, right, towards me as a, at the time, relatively young man to be in the position I was in, caring for his mother. I was still, although I was in my mid to late 30s, physically, I was youthful. I was a young, and of course the narcissistic abuse kind of makes you young. It's weird. It makes you youthful and a bit of a puppy, emotionally. Yeah. I think that's what it does to you. It's certainly what it did to me. And the recovery from being that can become one can be quite aggressive. One can become quite aggressive. One can become very assertive and very, I don't take no shit no more kind of attitude. And that's an important part of the recovery. That's got to happen. You've got to have that bit when you put your foot down, show your boundaries, enforce your boundaries, and you can't, in a strange way though, all you're doing is finally becoming like everybody else, It's a bit of a shock to you and everybody else when you start doing it. And I've had a lot of problems with that. People that have known me all my life, not my family, you understand, so it's tea I'm making. I've had some issues with people really not liking it, but like we said in the last video, you can't go back. You just gotta pitch on, pitch on. What do I mean by that? You have to forge. You can't really go back. And sorry, I'm a perfectionist when it comes to tea, and the strange chemistry lab experiment I've got going on here that thank God you can't see. It just needs a little more. So, where are we at? Give me a second. Yeah. So, yeah, there's this crazy bit when you start to make waves as far as everybody else is concerned. oh, they used to be such a reasonable person, but they didn't really respect you, you know? They didn't really see you. There's so much stuff to talk about here. This isn't really just about the narcissist or the narcissistic sociopath or even the highly narcissistic person. There's so much to talk about us, about what we're like now that we're limping our way away from the scene of the car crash, right? Because the most profound thing about it is learning how to be whole again, right? And having not been whole and rebuilding yourself from 0 to 100%, or whatever number you want to throw in there instead of 0, you know, just things like enforcing boundaries. I've got friends who have known me all my life and have known that I'm messed up, but never known what it is or why it is. And if we're honest, they're a little bit, you know, I'm not talking about people I really confide in. I'm talking about, well, some of them are, yeah. They kind of think I'm a bit of a hysteric and a bit, you know, why does it, I mean, it doesn't have to go on about, I mean, right now, it doesn't have to go on about narcissism, they'd be saying, you know, and they love you, you know, these are people who love you, right? Okay? So sometimes things get really tight, and let's say I fall out, let's say my friend's wife is not very nice to me and is quite narcissistic to me, and I have to talk to my friend and say, look, you got to understand, I'm being as cool about this as I can, but she's out of order, right? Rather than, and this is an incident I'm referring to, and I've made a video about before, where the friend was present on when it happened, right? And had heard the whole thing, and had even admitted to me, right, that would have made him cross too if it had been said to him. So basically, this guy isn't being really frank with his wife about her crappy behaviour to me, right? She, meanwhile, is being motivated by a certain amount of insecurity and defensiveness, because me and this guy go back a long way, and it annoys her that I spend time with him, even though I see him only a couple of times a year, because they live abroad now. The fascinating thing is, when it's time for me to say to my friend, look, you know this is what she's like, you know what she's doing, you know, he's got 2 or 3 ways he can go with this. But the one he plums for, I'm sorry, the 2 or 3 ways. I mean, obviously he can go, you're absolutely right, it's outrageous she spoke to you like that. If your wife or girlfriend spoke to me like that in front of you, I would be expecting you to have a word with her and say, don't talk to him like that. There are limits, that's not fair. You went too far, right? And this is a situation where somebody went too far. The other way to go with it is you don't know what you're talking about, go into complete denial and go like, and the message you're sent then is a complete and utter, like, look, it's like this, you either suck this up and shut the fuck up, or this isn't going to be happening anymore, right? These are the binary versions, right? But the version you tend to get is this one, yeah? And can't you be reasonable about it and suck it up? Which is actually different from the other one, believe it or not. Because the other one is like, don't you dare insult my wife, right? The third option, though, is kind of like, yeah, but, you know, you don't mind, do you? You'll be all right. Come on. You should see the things she says to me. You know, hear the things she says to me. And that's the one that betrays your narcissistic damage. They're not treating you as they would want to be treated themselves. They've got so used to you just being this puppy that when their friend, wife, family member kicks the puppy in the stomach and the puppy whelps, they just go, it's just a puppy. Even if they like your best friend, close friend, brother, they kind of go and suck it up, man. You're just a puppy. Now, how has this come about? It's come about from years and years of you being like loose-boundaried, pliable, eager to please, people pleaser stuff, you know, and as far as a lot of people are concerned, quite weak, which is not the appropriate word for this, because it's not weakness. Weakness is a failing of character when someone is put under enormous duress. Victims of narcissistic abuse are actually kind of more like refugees from their family. You wouldn't, so if a refugee sort of like crawled out of the sea onto the beach, right, and panting for air, you wouldn't accuse them of being weak. You would see that they are in extraordinary circumstances and need your help. You wouldn't be like, no, come on, get up, stand up. You know, you wouldn't be like that. You wouldn't be like, what are you doing on the beach, dick? You know what I mean? You'd be like, fuck, this guy is like, you know, crawled out of the sea. But because the whole narcissism victim matrix thing is so, it's so secret, it's so secretive, like child sex abuse. And because if you haven't had it, you don't know it happened. There's no bruises, like, you know, that's not always true, is it? But I mean, sorry, but if we're discussing the psychological abuse, the bruises aren't obvious. That you're just a bit crap, you know, and a bit wimpy and a bit sort of frail, you know, and I think that's why we go into sort of such assertive behaviour for a while after we come out of abuse, and we get very take no prisoners and even passive aggressive. Actually, it's a quick adolescent sort of maturation process that we're way behind on, you know. And of course, underneath this is a terrible rage of righteous indignation when you wake up to what you've been sitting still for all these years, and that it really was unfair, and that you weren't crazy, and the people that have done this to you have been complicit in your misery and your imprisonment. It's an imprisonment for all this time. The indignation, the rage that's inside you, inside me, is withering. You know, it is I think it's the most dangerous rage, right, outside of a full-blown psychopathic killer, you know. I think it is the shit, you know. I think it's very, very dangerous what narcissists do to people like us. I think it's incredibly dangerous, and destructive. And I don't think we all come out of it angels. I don't. I think we come out of it very hyper-conscious to the point of hysteria of criticism and of inferred criticism, and we're pretty much, I believe, and certainly it's true of me, that's all I can work with, isn't it, really? And what I see in the community as well, and other people, you know, that have got this, there's a lot of how dare you, and there's a lot of don't you talk to me like that stuff going on in the DNA now. And it has to be, in a way, it has to get out. I mean, that's a good thing, but it also, it shouldn't be their new destination. You know, we've got to get past that quick. Or, well, quick. I wouldn't even say quick. We've got to get past it eventually. Because we've got to grow. We've got to evolve. We've got to... you know, we don't want to get stuck. We don't want to get stuck there. Now... because it is actually highly narcissistic behaviour itself. To be hyper conscious of criticism, to be incredibly defensive of one's the sense of entitlement. It's you know, we're backing up right close to the narcissistic behaviour itself. How dare you? As an emotional component is very entitled. It's a very entitled attitude, right? Righteous indignation is a very entitled attitude, right? Everybody has to be prepared to be challenged and questioned on the choices, their opinions, things they've made. If you are above being challenged, if you're above being questioned, you are not really much better than the narcissist, are you? I mean, it's like you're on your way to becoming highly narcissistic. It's megalomaniacal to demand that people take your view as law. Now, obviously, we're all opinionated. I'm extremely opinionated. I've been thinking of occasion just then, right now, which a lot of you won't be lost on a lot of you, where I was absolutely sure I was right, and I'm still sure I'm right. Okay, but I also took a lot of criticism for my behaviour when I criticised the community, and I accepted the criticism. That's the difference. And I'm not all that. I'm not brilliant. I'm not Superman. I'm just reporting in, you see. I didn't go into a chain of defending against the criticism. I responded aggressively to a situation, and I knew when I did it that there would be a price to pay. So when it was time to pay the price, I took my lashes. I still believe I was right, but that's all it is. It's a belief. It's a part of me, but it's not perfect. It's my point of view. It's not fact. It's not a fact. I believe it's empirically right, but that's my job. If I don't believe it's empirically right, you know, what business did I have saying it? Now, other people could say to that, well, the people that disagree with you think they're empirically right. I know, and that's fine, and that's good, and say so, and hit back as hard as I hit out. But look, it doesn't have to be about one person being absolutely right and one person being absolutely wrong. It should be about, I, Mr. WTF, feel like this about that. And that's my thing. And you over there, you feel like that about that, right? Okay? Somehow, right, have that all said, we have to move forward. Don't I sound like the head of the PTA? God. Where it goes wrong is when it becomes a kind of an obsession. And that's what I have to avoid, because it's in me as well. The desire to obsessively dedicate an enormous amount of how dare you energy to somebody or anybody or a group or everyone even thinking such and such of me, right? It's not like that. It's pro-triangulation to do that, to go around controlling what people think about an individual or a situation. It is what it is. People think what they think. And if what they're thinking is misinformed, then fine, put the information out there. But the predisposition to weight the evidence, that's the stuff. That's the stuff. That's the danger. That's the danger. You got to say it all. And I think, and if you haven't got all the picture on day one, and you come to think something else, but I'm going around in circles here because I'm realising, even as I'm saying it, that a lot of people would say, well, that's what I've done, or that's what I did, or, you know, I was, and so there's no point to it. So let's leave that thread hanging at the moment, because I think when I've done the next bit, it will tie in with it, and we might be able to get a connection. So that's the danger of the narcissistic victim going into a kind of megalomania of their own, which is understandable because of all the hurt and the damage and the scars of and the shock of it all. Then you've got the supporting cast, people that aren't particularly or even hardly at all narcissistic, who kind of expect you to keep being the puppy, right? So when there's a crisis, they don't, I've found in my experience, people generally, not always, but generally, people generally don't look at the situation from all angles and go, I can see why they're upset. What they do is they look for what's going to give so the situation can move forward. So let's say there's a group of people in a working environment, and somebody has just lost their dog. Somebody else is generally the office bully, and somebody else is the victim of narcissism, and then there's the boss, and there's all sorts of other people in between, right? And what you've got is a situation where the bully is being a bully, the guy with the dog is upset, the guy with the dog and the bully get into an argument, right? And the whole office is unhappy. And somehow the way to deal with it is for the victim of narcissism person to kind of carry the can and be scapegoated for the situation in the office, right? So let's say that the guy, and it's probably going to be partly the victim's fault a little bit, because maybe they got involved in the argument, maybe they said, no, I think that's gone far enough now. And you watch everybody just like turn like this, like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, you know, everybody's like this, whoa, and you watch them go, oh, shut up. You know what I mean, or whatever, because you know what, the two people, everybody's like really like thinking about the feelings of the guy with the dog here, you know, like, well, he shouldn't, that's not really fair. And they're thinking of, and the bully, well, that's established, and that bully, you can always bet, is a really important part of the office dynamic. But this victim of narcissism over here, kind of Fred, right, Charlie Brown, he's kind of like this person, if we can kind of shift it onto him, then we'll all get on with it. And so afterwards, say at the coffee break or something, Fred says, why did everybody turn on me like that? And that's the point when a sensible person would go, yeah, that was weird, that shouldn't have happened. But that's not what you get. What you get is, well, it's just the way you talk sometimes. It really annoys people. And it's not, and that might even be true. You know, I annoy people. I annoy some people. It's not that, though. You weren't talking about that. We were talking about the fact that everybody was upset. It started to tip out of control, and everybody else could get involved and say, no, you know, but when you got involved, the whole room kind of went and grab it. And this narcissistic array, that's the situation, because obviously the bully is at least highly narcissistic. This fragile, hierarchical kind of system, like biosystem, you know, depends on the bully and the guy who's just lost his dog and all the people in between knowing their role and their place, and you, this narcissistic victim that's kind of the Charlie Brown of the thing, You know, you're going to be asked to run up and kick that football. Like, you know, like, is that Tommy? You did a thing about that. I think it is. And, you know, because without that, the dynamic, you're the runt of the litter, you know, the dynamic ain't going to run. And, you know, and it can even happen without you doing anything. You know, it's so sad. It's so awful. It's heartbreakingly sad and dreadful and ridiculous. But that, let's not kid around. That's the life I think a lot of us who are here have had. And addressing the problem, I mean, the first thing you've got to do really, I've found on the whole, is get out of a lot of situations where people know you as that. So, I mean, really what you need is a break. But for a lot of people, that just isn't a realistic option. I think it's good to change your place of work, if that's what people know you as, and be prepared to change work again, because it's going to take more than one go to get this right, you know. And I think some friends have to go. Some friends just aren't going to go with you. Like the last video, the cost of recovery. You know, some people, they have to go. They're not going to get it. They'll hold you back when you were about to really get clear, you know. Maybe you can always rekindle that relationship when you found out who you are. So we'll put all of that in place. Now we've got the megalomaniacal victim problem. We've got your friends who have stood by and have kind of held you down while the other people kicked you, really, you know. And now we're going to move on to the next bit. The highly narcissistic person who's not themselves a narcissistic sociopath, but there's a narcissistic sociopath in the mix. So that could be, say, the partner of the person. It could be the father or mother of the family. It could be the bullying brother, right? They're in the mix, but you're not just dealing with them. You've got wise to them, but you're dealing with the highly narcissistic array people, the people who are in this crowd, this team, this family, this group, who are, and that the narcissism is all trickling down from the king narcissist through this, you know, like stinking piss. It's like when they have those champagne wine glass things, you know, and you pour the champagne in at the top and it trickles down all the wine glass. It's that, but it's piss. And all the glasses are the people, right? And you're the one at the bottom. You're the beaker at the bottom of the thing. Not that there's ever a beaker there, but you know. How do they think? Because I guarantee you will spend more of your life dealing with them than with a narcissistic sociopath. Because they are rare, right? They're in your life. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt there's a mother or a cousin or a father or whatever, or a partner, an ex-partner who was a narcissist. Otherwise, I don't think you'd be here. But you're not generally dealing with them. You're dealing with highly narcissistic people. Even worse, you're dealing with people who aren't highly narcissistic. The rest of the time, they're not with you. Because this is the human magnet stuff. Because you know, the human magnet, I reckon, isn't just about attracting the narc to the narc victim who fits into them like a sort of the perfect jigsaw fit. You bring out the narcissism in people who aren't otherwise narcissistic. Like the way a drug pusher smells out somebody who's a recovered addict. So, I'm going to talk about my brother. You all know the story about how I looked after my mother for all that time. You couldn't even call it minimal support. Nobody ever really helped me out. And eventually the time came when there had to be some confrontations. I didn't want to have confrontations. I didn't want to make a scene. I was very, I put it all down to them not being up to it. I just thought, look, they're not up to it. They haven't got what it takes, you know. I tried not to be superior about it. It wasn't strictly, quite honestly, I wasn't being superior about it. I took an attitude of, they just couldn't do it. I really shouldn't have been left to do it either. But they, whatever, I just put it down to that. I said that my dad couldn't do it. This is before I knew about narcissism. I thought my dad couldn't do it, my sister couldn't do it, my brother couldn't do it. They couldn't face it. They couldn't face it to even visit or phone or anything. It was very, very rare. There were visits from my brother on birthday and Christmas and Easter, but that's how he did it, you know, and he would bring stuff. But that would be it. That'd be it. And what he used to do is he's still got stuff in the garage here. He's got 2 cars in the garage here, 2 sports cars. He's been doing up since he was a teenager. They're still here. It's 20 years later. He's still finishing them off. And it got to the point where he came less and less to see my mother, but he was still coming and working on the cars. And he would come to the house, work in that garage on his cars, and then fuck off again. And that became increasingly offensive to me. He also wouldn't let me know he was coming. I would realise by looking out of a window he was there. And I asked him, would he just get my mum some flowers? Because she knew he was there, because the nurses or the carers would come in and see him there working there. And he'd turn up whenever he felt like it, whenever he had a day off, you know. And they would see him there on one of their calls, and they'd say they'd seen him, so she'd know he was here, and he wouldn't come in. And it was vile, you know, a vile thing to do, to keep doing it. I mean, I'm not even saying he had to come in every time. He never did, unless he was making this special trip for Easter or Christmas or Mother's Day, you know, type stuff. But that would be it. That would be it. And then the mother dies. And not only does she die, she nearly dies once. There's 18 months but before she dies in the end, during which I had said to people, look, you know, this is it now. Make sure you've seen your mother before she dies, because that could happen any time again. Nobody's listening to me. So she dies. And then these narcissistic people start thinking. And they're thinking about money. They're thinking about their moral position in the situation. And they've decided, and I think this is fascinating, that whatever I've done, they can front it out. They've decided that the puppy, and now we're talking about a puppy that has done 7 years of, you know, to use a metaphor, jail time for the entire family, so nobody else ever had to be bothered by it, disturbed by it, or have an impact on their life in any way at all. And my mother's estate and this house are untouched, as opposed to them being drawn on for care costs or nursing home costs. So we're looking at something in the region between the value of this house and any additional care costs. Let's keep it simple. It's £50,000 a year, more or less, to care for someone full time. Let's say I did half of it and gave up. So it's 3.5 years. So that would be, maths is not my strong point. That's £100,000 a year. It's £300,000, £350,000 at the outside. Let's say £280,000 if she was in the worst care home in the world. That's the actual financial value of what I did. And that's quite apart from the psychological kicking I've taken. I'm ever so sorry, I'm going to pause this, because you know what? This is the second video I've made tonight, and I really want to have a little drink. It is Christmas, bear with me. God, you must think I'm so flaky. I am flaky. No, it's just, this is, you know, it's kind of emotional stuff, and I'm in the zone with it. Let's have a look at this. Let's have a look. So my brother, he's got this previous with, he knows that he's done fuck all. He knows worse than that. He's carried on. Now look, people in this community, they like to throw the phrase sense of entitlement about when talking about other YouTubers they don't get on with. I think, can we just try for a minute? I think this is sense of entitlement, don't you? That he can come and go to this property that technically at that time was my mother's more than anybody's, right? And to a situation that is only been perpetuated through my largesse, right? And he can come and go as he pleases without giving notice or anything, and refuse requests to show my mother some small kindness. Just flowers. I'm not even saying he had to bring them in. Just so I could take them into my mother and say, look, Dave, oh, I can't say his name. Just so I could say, look, he brought these. So, it's just that I could say, look, he brought these. So, what have we got? So, the funny thing is I once my mother died, I never looked to have any confrontations with anybody. But the funny thing is, and I find this absolutely fascinating about everything to do with any narcissistic or unfair behaviour that I've seen, whether it's, I talked last time about my breakup with my partner, who's not a narcissist. I'm not even sure she's highly narcissistic, but she's certainly acting in a highly narcissistic way, because the breakup didn't make any sense, and it's all about everything being my fault. And as we all know, when a relationship breaks down, quite apart from the fact that I've provided her and that family with an enormous amount of emotional and many other kinds of support. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I'm not a pain in the ass. I'm just saying that by any standards, I proved myself in that situation. I have to say, please take me on trust on that. I can't give too much detail away about that all over again. See the last video for a bit more on that. I was there when nobody else could be, when other people should have been, including the fathers of the children. It's this desire to provoke a situation where the moral high ground can be re-attained when the person that's doing the provocation has already done something that is questionable. So when you break up with somebody, no matter what, the person doing the dumping or the breaking up, they kind of feel bad because they're taking the high ground of going, I don't want to be with you, rather than the other way around, right? Now, feel bad stroke enjoying the power of it. The two seem to be wedded, you know. There must be instances, and I'm sure there are people clamouring at their YouTube screens right now, of where that just isn't how it went down, how there are people that have had to break up. For example, there are people who've had to break up with people that are addicts or alcoholics. Of course, there's all that. I'm not talking about these extreme situations. I'm talking about common or garden, you know, day to day, you know, relationships coming to an end or hitting a very rocky patch, and one person saying, you know what, I can't do this anymore, which I always think is a highly narcissistic way to talk. You know, it's bad enough the relationship's coming to an end. You don't have to turn it into some kind of competition for who's right and who's wrong. I think the person that's being told to leave deserves an explanation for why it's over, and they're not going to want to accept it. But what makes it nuts is when the person doing the dumping isn't comfortable with their personal agency and expression thereof. And that always says to me that something else is going on. The most obvious one is when the person's seeing somebody else. So there is no good reason for the relationship ending. It's just that they're going to be selfish, no longer, which is not illegitimate. We, see the last video about selfishness, right? Being selfish is your right up to a point, right? If you meet somebody you want to be with more, right? There's not really a lot of cutting around that, but understand it's selfish, but it's not shameful, not really. It's just, that's life. That's what happens. I mean, it's the romantic version of dumping one friend at school for a more popular person at school, Not very nice either, but that's life, So, this kind of crap version of personal agency that demands that the other person be in the wrong when they're the one doing the dumping. We could argue about it. I could justify these quite crude components I'm using, but we all know what I'm getting at. All right. It's a kind of a betrayal, isn't it? It's a betrayal. It may be a betrayal that's completely understandable, but it's a betrayal because the other person was under the impression we were moving, from A to B, and you've gone C on it, and it's just your choice, It's more understandable if you've been lazy, selfish, and thoughtless yourself and have taken the other person for granted, then you've had it coming. But I think you'll find you'll get less of this game playing when you've had it coming, because when you've had it coming, they'll tell you what it is. When you haven't done anything wrong and there's some other weird mandate in play, maybe the most vanilla one is when the person has grown. They've just grown. And they just need to break up the relationship for themselves. And they don't know how to justify it or explain it. That happens too. Sometimes people just outgrow the relationship. But there's still no shame in just saying, I need us to go our separate ways now. I wish it wasn't like this, but I'm not gonna. We're not doing this together anymore. What, I don't want to. That's legitimate. What's less legitimate is this desire to provoke and create a situation where the dumpee is going to catch all the flack, take all the blame, and be pilloried as the reason this thing has failed. Why do they want to do that? The reason is the dumper isn't just thinking about today. They're thinking about where they're going to be tomorrow and a week from now and a month from now. Even if they're not thinking it consciously, it's in the DNA, because they want every action they take from here on to be justifiable and to be with them in the morally superior position. Sadly. So if they go out and have a one-night stand with somebody, it's got to be justified somehow. Or if they... but that's quite a crude example. A better example is they know what your story's going to be. It's triangulation, isn't it? They want there to be a narrative where you're at fault, so that if you bump into their friends, and don't forget there might be children involved as well, who are going to have to be subscribing to a new narrative, that there's no question of them being at fault. And I think it's cowardly, because I think, let's just assume that everybody's at fault a bit. Sometimes it's 10 to 90, sometimes it's 50-50, you know. But let's just assume that this has failed, you know. Sometimes it's 99 to 1, you know. Sorry, but so what? It's not. We're not playing anymore, you know. It's game off, you know. God, I'm gonna have a drink. Excuse me. Right. So, my mum dies. And I've just used that to set up the idea of the personal agency and blame shifting and narrative building. And I don't want to fight with my father or my sister or my brother. Every one of them got shouted at proper, because every one of them wanted it. Every one of them wanted to drive me to the point where I did something that they considered unreasonable. There's a bit of a problem with that though, isn't there? I'd done the time for them and my mum and for me, but I'd done their time as well as mine by a long chalk. They were, if you must put it this way, they were in my debt to some degree. If they weren't in my debt, how could they have a part of... If they wanted to take money when this house is sold, if they wanted to take money out of my mum's estate, money that only existed because of what I'd gone through, knowing that I couldn't really put her in a home in her condition, and them showing no interest or giving me no assistance. And the one I want to talk about, the standoff I want to talk about today, because I'll probably do them all, is the one with my brother, which was the saddest one, because he's the one I'm the closest to, or I was. And that's what made it so bitterly disturbing, and why all the sizzle is in there. And so I'm leaving the house to go up and see my partner, and I thought he'd finished because he'd been there, but I couldn't see any sign of him. And I had to go. So I was going out of the house, and we've got this kind of alleyway built into the house's structure between the garage where he works on those cars and the rest of the house. And it's a confined space, and there's a gate in the alleyway. And what I've taken to doing, because I'm away from the house so much, when I was seeing my partner, is I've been locking this gate with I've got a chain and a padlock. And I was locking it, and I turned around, and he was on the other side of the street. He'd been talking to my neighbours across the road. Neighbours that saw everything that went on here. They saw the ambulances come and go. They knew my mum was here, and they used to be very sympathetic to me. They've seen to that. And he was across the other side of the street, and he was walking. He was waving at me like happy as Larry, you know. And he came over like all happy, you know. And he was saying, "Oh yeah, you're all right, you're all right." But you know what? Why wouldn't he be happy? As far as he was concerned, he was going to get a shitload of money. He'd completely sidestepped responsibility. He's got his dream job. He rakes it in. He's got this beautiful, well, at the time, you know, girlfriend. She's now his wife. They got married in a heartbeat after my mum died. Married and pregnant within months. Sidestepping all the icky, not getting married in front of, you know, my mum not being invited to the wedding in wheelchair or whatever. And he's bouncing over the road to see me, you know, which I'm thinking is weird. That's not what he was like before when he used to come and work on his car. I used to spy him out the window briefly. And he's like, how are you? And I'm in this dark place because it's breaking for me now. I was very sick when my mum died, psychologically, physically, PTSD symptoms. And I was hit by the loss to some extent, although it's really shock. But most disturbingly of all, me and my father fell out, and my financial situation was extremely precarious, and I suddenly found I wasn't going to be supported or helped the way I thought I was. Something happened to change all that, and it's a bit weird, and I don't want to go into it. But that resolved itself, but not well. It's complicated, but that sent me to a very, very dark place. I mean, can you imagine being a it's like one of those gangster stories, you know, the criminal mob, the police are coming after the kingpin, and one of the mob is selected to take the fall and do the time for the kingpin. You come out of the joint, and the kingpin, you think you're going to be looked after and set up with somewhere to live, you know, a job, you know, gently maybe reintegrated back into the group, you know. But to find out you are not acknowledged, to find out that the work you've done is being denied, you know, you would probably go on a, you know, Punisher type rampage, and even as dangerous as it would be, you'd probably like kill the fucker. You know what I mean? And that was my world. I became incredibly paranoid. Please understand, I mean, a lot of the videos I've made before now, I was still recovering from all of this. It's taken years for me to, you know, refocus and stuff. And so my brother comes across the road, bouncing along, pleased to see me. And I've stopped being that puppy, you know. And this is before I know about narcissism. I've stopped being the puppy. I've seen my mother get sicker and sicker. I've been in and out of hospital with her so many times. I've had to go over to Coventry, which isn't that near to here. I've been so alone with it all. And then I escape from that, and my family turn on me, and then my partner nearly dies, and I'm thrown into another world of responsibility with childcare and her, and I go through all of that, and then I've got school, and I'm a man now who has been. It's all gone a bit Shawshank Redemption, you know, without meaning to sound too dramatic. It was beyond the tolerance of a normal, sane human being. And now he wants to have a jolly chat. So I just said to him, I'm finding it really hard, Dave. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what. I don't know what's going on with financially. I don't know what's going to become of me. I don't know what's happening with the house. It's hanging over me. And as soon as I went there, as soon as I spoke to him like a grown-up, the jolly bunny facade just dropped. And he went straight into A1 defensive, right? Like, I don't mean aggressive defensive or passive aggressive defensive. I mean, he just went, oh, we're having a grown-up conversation. He couldn't even meet me halfway and go, oh, yeah, no. Yeah, you must do. He didn't do that. Because you'd think, wouldn't you? You'd think he'd go, no, yeah, man. Yeah, yeah, you've had it rough, dude. Look, I'll catch you later. It's just hang in there, yeah? And maybe we'll get together for a drink sometime, you know, maybe. All right, hey, later! Right, that's not what he did, and I really would have done that if I were him. What he did instead was he went, well, I haven't put you in that position. I haven't made the house hang over you like that. It's nothing to do with me. Straight away. I mean, I wasn't even fielding for that. And what did I say? I said something to him then, and I can't remember what it was. It wasn't that bad though. It was just sort of like, I just said something like, I can't remember, but it would have been something like, well, you know, I came back at him, but it wasn't that bad. I just said, well, you know, kind of, don't you think you should, you know, think more about it? It was that kind of remark, right? And he did this. He went, right, if you're going to be like that about it, and he walked away, which I thought was passive aggressive, right? And I did something I shouldn't, well, you know, it's not something I shouldn't have done. I did something really weird. I said something that my father would say if he was trying to fuck me off. And I'm fascinated that I did. And I said to him, you're running away. Meaning you're running away from the situation. You're running away from the truth of it. And fuck, he snapped, right? He didn't get furious, which he was going to find out what that looked like in about 30 seconds time. He became incredibly self-aggrandizing, and he turned around and he did this. Now, I want you to remember something. I'm in a closed space. I'm in a corridor that's about the length of just over the length, about the length of a telephone kiosk, right? With a locked gate behind me. I've got nowhere to go. I know from my aggression training that when you get into a confrontation with somebody and there's anger, right, you must always leave an exit for the person that is angry, right? This is what he did. He turned back around and he came towards me, backing me into this corner, wagging his finger at me, and he said, right, you are really starting to piss me off now. Right? Now then, my dear fellow community members, many of you, some of you, most of you, have seen me very angry. I gave him the full 100% Mr. Double TF loses his shit. The street heard the following 30 seconds. And I exploded in that guy's face. I pushed him back with all of my strength. Although it annoys me a little bit, it didn't fall over, which means I'm probably not as strong as I think I am. And I said, fuck off. Get in your fucking car and piss off. But about 300 times louder than that. And he was fucking... He was terrified. He backed off like a little bitch. He somehow, in less than a second, got from being in my face, and please remember, he cornered me, like that, right? He got to his car, and he had the car door open, he had his foot on the, you know, on the inside the car, and he was ready to dive in that car. He was terrified. And he should have been terrified, because I was beyond reason. I mean, I was so close to taking the law into my own hands. I don't even know what would have happened if it had gone another way. I had broken. I'd broken. All bets were off. All bets were off. Anything could have happened. And I said to him, you do not speak to me like that. After what I have done, after what has gone on here. And somehow, from there, we went to have a conversation, because that should have really been it. And I don't completely fully understand all of it myself. But he said, and bearing in mind he had at least taken this kind of sub-dom position, you know, subordinate position by running away, by God, he wasn't prepared for it. Which is extraordinary, isn't it? Ollie's talked about this as well with his brother. I mean, Ollie's a tough-looking motherfucker, you know. I mean, Ollie would